Miami OC Shannon Dawson just spilled the tea on his wide receiver room. We can expect to see a lot more of them playing in games this year.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday. We made it. I am Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, co-host of Locked On ACC and host of Postgame on the Miami Hurricanes radio network. And thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is around the corner, so visit FanDuel's app today and start planning your future bets right now. On this episode, got a significant update on Samson Okunlola. People are always asking about the former five-star offensive tackle recruit heading into his third year. When's he going to play or when's he going to transfer is a question a lot of fans ask. We have answers for you. We'll talk about some of the most important things said on Thursday by head coach Mario Cristobal, offensive coordinator Shannon Dawson, and defensive coordinator Corey Heatherman. Pretty clear to me, Heatherman has a certain obsession that I think is going to make Miami's defense better. But one of, I think, the most interesting takeaways from OC Shannon Dawson on Thursday was what he said about his wide receiver room. Folks, this is something that I've been hypothesizing for the past several weeks, especially after watching Miami out on the practice field, that you could, I guess you could look at this as a good thing or potentially a bad thing. I tend to look at it as a good thing, that there's not a whole lot of separation when it comes to your top 3 or 4 receivers. Now, I look at that in a positive way in the fact that on any given practice, certain guys have been stepping up and making plays, and sometimes that goes 6 or 7 deep. We've talked about true freshmen like Josh Moore, Malachi Toney, and also Dalen Upshaw having some really good days out there and not looking like freshmen. CJ Daniels, who's the elder statesman of that room, the transfer from LSU, has been pretty consistent throughout. We all know the talent of JoJo Trader, who could be ready to break through this year. Hopefully Ray Joseph is ready to break through this year. Keelin Marion and Tony Johnson have been making plays. Marion is a guy who has looked really good, like in 11-on-11s. He tends to turn it on even more so in, game type of scrimmage situations than he does in drills, which I think is a good thing. And Tony Johnson is your most, I guess, polished, experienced of your slot receivers. And so here's what Shannon Dawson, the offensive coordinator, had to say about his receiver room. A lot of competition, he said. We have a lot more people that are rotating in. I feel better about a lot of those guys. What I think you can look forward to is a lot more people playing in games, he said. We're deeper than we've been. Deeper in a way where I feel very comfortable in looking out there and seeing a whole lot of different people being out there. And I feel excited about that. So that reinforces my opinion that this is not an issue of, hey, you've got 7 or 8 guys out there, which means it's not good because you don't have top guys creating separation. I think they've really embraced the competition, and there are several of these receivers who look like they're going to be top options out there. And, this goes back to something that was, factual last year and an observation that a lot of folks made. Miami didn't rotate a whole lot at the receiver position a year ago. You essentially had 4 guys who got on the field consistently playing in 3 different spots, that between Isaiah Horton, Jacoby George, Xavier Restrepo, of course, who rarely ever left the field, and I get it, and Sam Brown, those 4 were primarily playing and rotating through, 3 positions on the field at once. And there wasn't a whole lot of playing time to be had for the likes of JoJo Trader, Chance Robinson, and some of the other younger guys on the roster. They didn't rotate much. Ray Joseph hasn't gotten a whole lot of playing time the last couple of years. This year, Miami has, I guess you can call it a problem, but it's a good problem to have when you have a lot of depth, guys who are going to be vying for, 3 spots on the field at once. If you look at the experience of Miami's receiver room, and I know we talk about there is a lot of youth, right? When you have several true freshmen who are practicing well, couple of second-year guys who haven't played much. Like, by far, your most experienced receiver is C.J. Daniels, who's heading into his 6th year. He played first 4 years of his career at Liberty, played at LSU last year. Daniels, throughout his career, has scored 21 receiving touchdowns, 2,434 receiving yards. Then next up, you've got Tony Johnson and Keelin Marion, whose stats are pretty similar through their first few years in college. Tony Johnson, the slot receiver who transferred in from Cincinnati, has scored 13 receiving touchdowns in his career, 1,118 yards. Keelin Marion, who, of course, his like real superpower is his kick returning on special teams, but he also wants to prove he's a weapon at wideout as well. And he's put up some decent numbers through the first few years of his career, 1,125 receiving yards, 7 receiving touchdowns to go along with his multiple kick return touchdowns. Ray Joseph, we mentioned he hasn't played a whole lot because he's been behind Xavier Restrepo for the past couple of seasons. In 2 years at Miami, just 110 receiving yards for Ray, no touchdowns. He's going to get more opportunities, I think, this year. JoJo Trader, who didn't play much until he started the Pop-Tarts Bowl, played really well in that game. In his career, 1 season so far, 6 receptions for 91 yards and a touchdown. Nye Carr, just 1 reception for 8 yards. Chance Robinson, no receiving stats so far heading into his 2nd year. And then you've got Josh Moore, Malachi Toney, and Dalen Upshaw as true freshmen. So with that group, things that I've been encouraged by, not only are they making plays in practice, but they've worked really hard with Carson Beck to be building that timing and chemistry. Obviously, Beck, missed some important reps during spring football when he wasn't cleared to throw. So that was like mental rep and film study time for him. But since the player-led practices, it started, I think, late April, early May into these first 2 weeks plus of training camp. I know he's been working really hard with his receiving room. And then, of course, when we talk about pass catchers, obviously about more than just the receivers. And Shannon Dawson also speaks really highly of his tight ends who are running good routes, and they're also blocking well. And we know the guys who are going to be at the top of that tight end rotation, Elijah Lofton, who I think can become a really important safety valve and an all-over-the-field type of guy for Carson Beck, and Alex Bowman, who's more of your traditional inline tight end, but he's been a really good red zone weapon and short yardage weapon early in his career. He scored a handful of touchdowns, and he's able to move the chains. So, folks, Shannon Dawson's words to me were very reassuring that he's pleased with the work his receivers are doing. And I don't want to forget to shout out Kevin Beard, because, again, when you're talking about having potentially, I think there's 8 names that I mentioned and talked about as like the primary players in that receiving room. When you've got at least 8 receivers practicing at a high level, that's a testament to Kevin Beard, your wide receivers coach, that he's getting these guys developed, he's getting these guys ready, and he's putting them through some solid work in practice. So I am encouraged. And I know, again, the receiver room, it's been a question mark because you lost so much production from last year. You're having to replace a ton of last year's production, including your top tight ends like Elijah Arroyo and Riley Williams, who have both moved on. So I think Shannon Dawson's words are comforting. I think he truly believes what he says about those receivers. And if any of you guys were frustrated last year that Miami wasn't using, more receivers in the rotation, I think you're going to get that this year. Now, I don't know how deep the rotation is going to be in the opening game against Notre Dame, given that it's probably the best defense you're going to face all year. They're going to make it really difficult for receivers to create separation with their defensive backfield. So even if the rotation maybe doesn't go 8 deep the first game, we may see that at times throughout the season. We got really illuminating stuff from also Mario Cristobal talked about the receivers. Let me get to that before we move on to Carson Beck. So Coach Cristobal, talked about his talent. He says, we feel strongly about that room. It's a tight battle for the right reasons, he says. It's because guys are doing the right things. They're playing hard and playing at a high level. They have welcomed competition, he said, of the receiver room. He talked about that at times there seems like there's been a bit of separation here and there, but it's been too close to call, he says. Guys are willing to not only catch the ball, but do all the other things that come with it. Blocking, it's a huge part of it, folks. I mean, you remember how well Xavier Restrepo had some huge blocks last year. Jacoby George had some critical blocks. Sam Brown, even when he wasn't always like producing with the receiving stats, was making some big blocks downfield. Blocking is non-negotiable for that receiving core. We'll hear more from what Mario Cristobal had to say about his roster. Is he satisfied with the depth? You want to keep it locked right here, my friends. We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. As summer winds down, something nice about getting back into a routine that you love. Wayfair makes it easy to set yourself up for the season ahead. From bedding and linens to storage solutions for every room, Wayfair is your one-stop shop to refresh your home. Guys, I love about Wayfair. My wife and I love browsing all the furniture, and man, they are just so efficient with their shipping. Guys, the delivery was fast and free, even for something big. So convenient to find exactly what we needed all in one place and at a price that fit our budget. This is the perfect time to get my home ready and yours as well, whether that's organizing, upgrading my workspace, or making weeknight dinners easier. Get organized, refreshed, and back to routine for way less. Head to wayfair.com right now to shop all things home. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair. Every style, every home. Thank you for making Locked On Canes your first listen on this Friday. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. For your next listen, make sure you check out Locked On ACC. Kenton Gibbs and I host that show, taking you all around the conference, all the big stories, football previews, basketball previews before you know it. Locked On ACC is available free wherever you get your podcasts and available free on YouTube. So other things about his quarterback and the rest of his roster from Shannon Dawson. Shannon Dawson on Carson Beck. And we talked on yesterday's episode about Beck. Beck is starting to get some national praise again after what was kind of a depressing offseason, just in terms of the headlines, right? People are scrutinizing this dude's breakup. Like, well, you're in 2025 when they're like, dissecting the love life of a college quarterback. It didn't used to be that way, but here we are. His car is getting stolen. People are concerned about him coming off the elbow surgery. But, Beck has done himself a lot of favors by going out there and consistently performing. And the national folks who have been out to practices like Eric McLean from ACC Network, Brandon Marcello, CBS Sports, like they're actually seeing it with their own eyes that Beck physically looks fantastic out there. The arm is fully recovered from the elbow surgery. He crushed his rehab, which is important. And he's also out there leading. He's leading and he's engaging with his teammates, which is key. Shannon Dawson talked about Beck and the way he's been performing so far. It shows that he's played a lot of football. He's played in a ton of games, Dawson said. When you go out there, truly 11 on 11, not the player-led stuff in the summer, you're curious in how that will go. He really didn't miss a beat, Dawson said. He can throw at an elite level. His mentality of the game is different because of how he's been around the game. The way he goes about things is professional. Now, Dawson also talked about his backup quarterbacks. He was asked that question, and he's bullish, okay? He said, I think we have the best quarterback room in the nation, but he chuckled and said, I'm biased a little bit. Emory Williams, he said, is playing really, really well. And by the way, guys, I've seen it. Like Emory has practiced really well, and I know he's got a chip on his shoulder after, the way that Pop-Tarts Bowl went for him last year. He's trying to work through those things. Now he says, Dawson on his backups, will they make a bonehead thing every now and again? Yeah, that's my job to level that out, he said. Remember, Dawson is also the quarterback's coach, but they've shown spurts of doing really, really good things, really talented guys. He also said of Judd Anderson has shown as much growth as anybody from spring football to fall camp. So Dawson spoke a little bit more on, and this was something that we brought up with the Carson Beck conversation yesterday. My keys for Carson to really thrive in Miami's offense. One of the things that I brought up was, of course, cutting the turnovers down compared to what they were in Georgia last year, where he had the 12 interceptions. That was, we can all confidently say that was too much. He's got to cut down the turnovers. Remember, Cam Ward came into Miami with an alleged fumbling problem. He cut that out. Now Carson Beck needs to cut out the INTs from last year. Last year was the only year where he was double digit in interceptions. So I think that was a bit of an aberration for him, but we know he's got to cut that down. And then I think another key for Beck is he's really got to thrive with the autonomy that he has, that Shannon Dawson gives his quarterbacks a rare amount of input and autonomy in their offense that a lot of coordinators and quarterbacks coaches don't give. So Dawson says, he needs Beck to figure out, what's the atmosphere that he loves to play in, and we're going to mold it, I think it being our offense around that. He says we did a bit of that last year when we took Cam Ward sitting down and trying to figure out how his mind works for the game and what he likes to do. Our offense looked different than the prior year. Things that we did that we didn't do the year before, a fair amount of stuff we did because of his comfort level. With Carson, it's about the same percentage, he said, on the comfort level. There are things he felt really comfortable with, and we didn't have exactly that or organized that way. So there are definitely things we're doing now that we didn't do before. You spent a lot of time in the season figuring out what you do well, but also studying a lot of teams from the NFL and college that might fit into ours. There are these handful of things that are, this really fits what we do if we can make it make sense to our guys. There's a handful of that I'm excited to see, to be honest with you. A couple of other notes from Shannon Dawson. He says Shamar Brown, who, is Miami's transfer running back out of North Dakota State, who joins Mark Fletcher and Jordan Lyle. I think that's going to be a 1-2-3 punch this year. Shamar Brown is hard to tackle. He's built in a way where you better get your pads low, he said. And on Jordan Lyle, who I think was very good last year as a true freshman, I think he's ready to make an even bigger jump this year, that Lyle has a high ability to make people miss. Now, before we segue over to the defensive side of the football, I just want to quickly revisit a big topic of ours yesterday. We were talking about second-year breakout players because ESPN, they feel that JoJo Trader, and I'm going to co-sign on this, can make a big leap for Miami in his second year. We mentioned his stats didn't play a lot last year, 6 receptions, 91 yards, and a touchdown, could become a featured guy on that offense this year. We gave you some other names of possible second-year breakouts this year. We got a lot of comments on our YouTube channel and at Alex Donno on X, and one that I should have brought up because I do believe this kid's going to make kid. It feels so condescending when I refer to these guys as kids. They're grown men now, so forgive me. This young man, Armando Blunt, I think is going to make a big jump in year 2. And we've discussed the way he's been practicing, reportedly had a really good scrimmage last week. Miami's going to have another scrimmage, by the way, coming up this Sunday, which is going to be more opportunities for these young men. And Sunday is going to be exactly 2 weeks away from the Notre Dame game. So that's a really important benchmark. So you can add Armando Blunt to that list of players who I think are going to make a second-year breakthrough. And, some other folks brought up, hey, what about, Jordan Lyle, O.J. Frederique? I didn't include them in second-year breakthroughs because I think they've already broken through. I mean, we all saw Jordan Lyle with our own eyes become essentially Miami's third running back last year as a true freshman behind Damian Martinez and Mark Fletcher. And Lyle had his share of awesome moments, including that 90-plus yard touchdown that he scored against USF. I would say he's already broken out. Same thing with O.J. Frederique. I mean, started every game last year, had really good PFF stats at corner. And someone brought up Xavier Lucas. Same thing. I think he already had his breakout year last year as a true freshman. So I didn't include them for that reason. But another second-year breakout that I'm very bullish on would definitely be Armando Blunt. And Coach Cristobal, he spoke a little bit. Miami, by the way, had an evening practice last night. They usually practice in the morning. They broke their routine. They practiced under the lights yesterday. And it makes sense because Cristobal discussed the importance of practicing at all different times of day when they might have a game, right? You're going to have some night games, including your opener. It's going to be under the lights, 7:30 p.m. at Hard Rock Stadium in a couple of weeks. So we said it was important to get in a night practice. Quote, guys have to understand their clock, what to eat, when to eat it, when to go to bed, just how to program themselves to be as effective as possible. So they're going to have, I guess, probably maybe another evening practice or two before Notre Dame, just so they can program their bodies to really peak at that time of the evening. If that makes sense to you, it makes sense to me. So hopefully it makes sense to you. Cristobal mentioned in a big picture point of view, he says, we have an agreement to push each other all the way until we reach that breakthrough, right? And we've noted Miami practices really hard, really physical once the pads come on. And I think Cristobal said a similar thing to me when I interviewed him back at ACC Media Days a few weeks ago. So they push each other all the way till they get that breakthrough. Cristobal talked about the overall team depth. He said, and this is interesting insight, quote, in modern day football, you'd be very fortunate to get 2.5 deep at each position. And, you know, what that means is this day and age, if you're a third stringer somewhere, it's really easy to transfer and move up somebody else's depth chart, right? Sometimes it's easier to move up a different depth chart than it is your own. So guys don't, stick around the way that they used to. So you're fortunate to go 2.5 deep at each position, he says. But you will find now we're more readily approaching a place where we have a 2 deep that's accountable at each position. Not all the way there yet, he says. We feel we have multiple guys that can play winning football, have to continue pressing that and pushing that, he said. We are better, Cristobal added, a drastic difference from 3 years ago to the roster right now. It's never good enough, he said. We feel very strongly about our roster and confident about our mentality and our approach. Here's some important notes from defensive coordinator Corey Heatherman. And I love this guy already. If you've ever, had a chance to see him talk, he's so intense. And he's got that Boston accent going, which somehow adds to the intensity level. His eyes are like, basically creating lasers that go through your face. Like, he's a really intense guy. Corey Heatherman said on the defense, and the defense is the area that needs the biggest, most dramatic turnaround. Not good enough last year whatsoever. He gets brought in to fix it. He said, quote, we're playing faster and communicating better, Heatherman says. We've taken a step up now to continue to build on that each week. Faster to the football, better communication every play. Heatherman also added, and this has been evident in practices, that he is doing some mixing and matching of guys to find the best position for players. So there has been a little bit of tweaking, and that happens on both sides. I mean, we all know that Alex Mirabal, Miami's offensive line coach, likes to cross-train guys all over the line. Heatherman is going to do some stuff like that on the defensive side as well. Heatherman talked about the defensive secondary. He said of Xavier Lucas, he's always watching film, constantly improving. On Keontae Scott, safety, Zechariah Poyser, Jacoby Thomas. He talked about those guys performing well in practice. He also added that Dylan Day is playing well wherever he is. Be careful, Heatherman said. Oh, man. And, okay, so a big emphasis, and we talk a lot about communication gets brought up with Heatherman, but the other big emphasis is takeaways. Like, he's borderline obsessive about that. In practice, they count all of the strip attempts. They keep track of that, how often the ball touches the ground. Very obsessive about swarming to the football. Heatherman said there could be 5 corners that rotate into games. He says if the ball is in the air, we have to have it. If the ball is in the air, we have to have it. That's the number one message, he said. Now, from the defensive line and defensive side, we'll go to the offensive line. Really, really interesting article, column written by Barry Jackson in the Miami Herald to spotlight Samson Okunlola, the pancake honcho, who is one of the most asked about players in my social media mentions, my YouTube comments. Everyone wants to know what's going on with Samson. Is he going to start this year? Why is he still here? Why hasn't he transferred? Which Alex Mirabal kind of finds that to be a disrespectful question about Samson, and I can understand his point of view on that. So there's a really, really positive update on Okunlola. You want to keep it locked right here. We're not done yet on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Folks, August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day. It's a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions, I should say. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or you're ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week 1 even kicks off, this is your moment. So take a flyer on the MVP race. You like Josh Allen in Buffalo, take a flyer on your Super Bowl winner. And, as a Dolphin fan, I can't go too Buffalo heavy. So I don't know. Maybe I go in with the favorites, the Philadelphia Eagles, to repeat. But you can take your shot right now. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your future bets now, because Futures Day is one day, August 26th, and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. Thank you for making Locked On Canes your first listen. And for the everydayers, you want to take that everydayer experience to the next level? Sign up and become a Locked On Canes insider. Click that link in the show description below. When you're an insider, you get text messages directly from my phone to yours, one-on-one questions and answers, breaking news, show updates, recruiting updates. People keep asking me, Donno, what happens if we blow out Notre Dame? What happens with recruiting? I mean, that's such a bullish hypothetical. Like, I don't want to get myself too cocky, because Notre Dame is going to be a big challenge opening week. But yeah, if Miami pulls off a big win and a convincing win, you can expect the floodgates to open when it comes to flips. So try it free for 14 days. Click the link below, become a Locked On Canes insider. Really good article written by Barry Jackson on Samson Okunlola, who, remember, is a former 5-star recruit. He's heading into his 3rd year at Miami, and so far hasn't played a whole lot. To this point, has not won a starting job, at least not yet, on the offensive line. He's also, I think he's dealt with some injuries and some challenges behind the scenes. But people keep wondering, like, is this guy not developing? Is this guy going to hit the transfer portal any minute now? I got to tell you, folks, first and foremost, I've seen it with my own eyes, this past month. Samson has been practicing really well, and he's getting complimented by his teammates. I mean, we had on Hayden Lowe earlier this week from Miami's defensive line. One of the first names that he brought up of a guy who gives him a tough time in practice was Samson Okunlola. And Okunlola, instead of, we talked about modern day college football. A lot of guys, if you're not top of the depth chart, you don't stick around, you find someplace else. He's actually focused not only on the on-field development he's getting from Alex Mirabal and Mario Cristobal, he's also focused on his studies. So Barry Jackson noted that Okunlola has earned his bachelor's degree already in just 2.5 years. I graduated from Miami 18 and a half years ago, and believe me, I needed every single semester of my 4 years to get enough credits to earn my bachelor's. And this dude is doing it in 2.5 years. His growth has been so pronounced, Barry Jackson writes, that offensive line coach Alex Mirabal said he's confident that Okunlola will absolutely become a multi-year starter for UM. So remember, Okunlola, heading into his 3rd year this year, has used a red shirt. So he's got, even after this year, will have 2 years of eligibility remaining this upcoming year, where I don't expect him to start this year, but I think he's going to be important rotational guy. Will still have 2 years of eligibility to possibly be a starter down the road. Mirabal added, I have no doubt about that, on him being a starter in the future. Even though he's not expected to start at the beginning of the season, Jackson writes, barring injuries, quote, he's going to make it because of his work ethic and his want to, which are unbelievable, Mirabal said during a recent conversation. He has done an unbelievable job of improving. He says, Mirabal says, there are 17 ACC schools. He can start at all of them. He has displayed a tremendous amount of a thing people nowadays lack, which is patience. He's trusting in his work. With his intelligence, he's going to achieve what we all want him to achieve. Asked if he ever considered leaving, Okunlola suggested he hasn't, although he didn't answer the question directly, Jackson writes. I'm committed to the process, he said. I love the process. I love hard work. I love being detailed and getting better. Mirabal said, I tell people all the time, the fans, the media, the coaches, they complain about how negative the transfer portal is. And when they question the kid, how come you stuck around? How come you haven't jumped in the portal? Mirabal says, I truly believe it's because Samson knows and sees that our coaching staff believes in him and trusts him. I feel he believes in us and trusts in us, as does his family. He sees himself growing and developing. And, guys, listen, there's a logjam this year because Miami, we have a pretty good idea of at least 4 out of the 5 starters, and it's probably going to be at the quote-unquote open position, probably going to be Matthew McCoy at left guard, although I think Okunlola and Ryan Rodriguez have also competed there. But even if he doesn't start this year, next season, Francis Mauigoa is going to be off to the NFL. Nez Cooper going to be off to the NFL. Markel Bell off to the NFL. James Brockermeyer is not going to be back next year. So, you're talking about potentially 4 starting jobs open next year. And I absolutely believe that Samson has positioned himself and will continue to do so, because it's a constant process of growth and development, that he's going to put himself in a really good spot to grab a starting job on that offensive line next year. And as Mirabal said, his patience at that point will have paid off. Folks, thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen. For your next listen, make sure you check out our guy, the recruiting overlord, Brian Smith, who hosts a show here on Locked On called The Portal. He talks about all of this modern stuff in the college game, NIL, transfer portal, recruiting. Brian breaks all of it down at a high level on the Portal podcast. And folks, we're going to have at least one weekend episode coming up. Saturday, tomorrow, I'm going to sit down with Michael Yo from Comics and Canes, famous comedian, big-time radio guy. Like Michael is a dude. He's always working hard, and I'm going to be doing even coming up in a couple of weeks, we'll be doing a live in front of an audience show, Michael, me, and Gio Milian at the Improv in Dania. So hit us up for more information on that. But tomorrow, Saturday, Michael is going to join me here on Locked On Canes. We'll get his take on the season coming up. So make sure you smash that like button, subscribe on YouTube, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your pods. And we'll talk to you again tomorrow on another episode of Locked On Canes. We are part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.